If you don't know me, my name is Julia Chen. I'm the Activities Director at the Yale Club, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to our virtual mixology class.
This is exciting. Thank you for being here. And you know, so my name is Karl Franz Williams. I was class of 90, maybe too long ago. Class of 97 at Brantford. Yeah, I mean, I am the owner of the Anchor Spa. For those who know, the Anchor in New Haven, Connecticut, it's been there since 1939. And in 2016, we took it over and it turned it into a cocktail bar, which is what it is today. So if you're in New Haven for any reason, please feel free to stop by. It's really awesome, great place to be. And then also 67 Orange, which is in Harlem. We've been open for 12 years now. We're in 113 and 8th Ave, Frederick Douglass. Great cocktail bar, great place to come check out. So come hang out with us. So I am very excited to be here today making cocktails for you, having some fun on a Friday night. Feel free to ask me any questions. Raise your hand, talk. Like, this is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be a good time, and that's what we're looking for. It's Friday night. We can't go to clubs. We can't go to bars. The pandemic has us at home, so we're going to make the most of the time that we have. So the idea is that we're going to make some drinks tonight, and if you have the kit with you, really awesome. If you don't, we can get you kits after this, and we are recording this, so we can make these kits for you anytime. But the idea is to just have a great experience and have a good time. So let's get started. We're working with a really fantastic rum. And for those who don't know, I owned a rum bar for a time. It was called Solomon and Cuff. And rum is very, very important to me. And as a Caribbean person, as a person of Caribbean descent, being able to drink rum, to enjoy rum punch is something that has always been a part of my culture. So, it's working with rum is something I get very, very passionate about. And so this rum in particular, I fell in love with this rum a few years ago. A good friend of mine, Jan. Jan, I've sat next to his station at his bar many times and had him make me great drinks. And then when I found out that he was working on rum, I was like, dude, I got to taste the rum that you're working on. But this is a Jamaican rum. And so even taking a second back, rum is a spirit made with sugarcane. And you can't have a rum without sugarcane, whether or not. And the way this came about, rum came about as a byproduct. So whenever you make sugar from sugarcane, the byproduct of making sugar from sugarcane is molasses. There was lots of molasses in colonial America. Rum was the first great agricultural sort of export from the New Americas, the one where they were making great money from. And so, sugar was, I'm sorry, and then rum was a post follow-up. And so the idea was that there needed to be something to do with all of this sort of leftover molasses. And they started converting, they figured out that they could distill the molasses into a product, and that product, rum, was extremely delicious, especially when mixed with citrus and sugar. And so that was the beginning of most of the cocktails that contain rum. But that is what rum is. And so this one is a rum from Hamden Estate, and I won't do it justice. So I'll let Jan jump in here now and tell the story of Hamden rum.
I'm going to unmute myself now. Thank you for reminding me. So my name's Jan Warren. I worked at a cocktail bar called Dutch Kills for a long time. where Karl was a regular guest, and I've shaken more than my share of daiquiris for him. That's for sure.
Hey, easy. You can't tell all the secrets now.
So Hamden, and I'm going to talk about as an entire product for 1 second also. So before specifically Hamden, rum really is kind of like Karl said, the secondary export from the Caribbean to the New World. You have sugar being the kind of, you have this explosion of sugar production where the Caribbean is sort of the Silicon Valley of the 1700s, right? I mean, the most valuable colonial properties in the 1700s are all in the Caribbean. Sugar is king. And like Karl also said, the sugar refinement process leaves you with molasses. Since the sugar refinement process is not perfect, there is some sugar left over in the molasses. If it was perfect, there would be no sugar left over and they would have sold all the sugar. But thankfully, there's some sugar left over. That is mixed with some local water, usually from a local water source, and then fermented and then distilled. And that's where you end up with rum. Aging rum, like the rum you have is between 7 and 8 years old. It's got some barrels that are 7, some barrels that are 8. Our next releases will be purely 8. But what you have in your hand is an aged rum, and aged rum really starts to be aged really because of transport and storage, right? In the 1700s, you have wooden barrels are the way that you transport and store things. So the flavor of rum, of aged rum, comes from, it's sort of an accident, really. It's not like an intentional, we're going to age this stuff and it's going to taste better. It was just sort of a product of the transportation. So Hamden opens in 1753. It's actually a Scottish family, comes to Jamaica in early 1750s, has a large sugar factory, and they start making rum. They've continually operated for 267 years now, and they haven't had their own brand until very recently. Rum. Go ahead.
You faded for a second there. I don't know if you were catching a quick flight to the Caribbean or not.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe if you missed what I said, please just ask me tell me where I went off. But Hamden starts making rum in 1753. They make it continually for 267 years, and they have their own brand now. And the reason it's taken so long to have their own brand is because rum is really a commodity. So bought in the Caribbean, shipped to Europe, aged in Europe, and then blended and resold. Kind of the same way single malt Scotch was before the 1950s. When you see the category of single malt Scotch, all the single malt was used for blended whiskeys, right? As a component of a blend. The same way these really flavorful Jamaican rums, which you have an example of in front of you right now, were only used as components of blends. And we're starting to see the same thing now, where people are starting to really get interested in what gives these blends character, because you have pot stills and column stills, continuous distillation and batch distillation. And the column still is technologically advanced and gives you a very high alcohol content, but strips out all the flavor. The pot still is sort of a throwback to 1700s distillation technology, where it doesn't give you very high alcohol content, but it still leaves a lot of the other compounds, the flavor compounds, esters, fatty acids, polyphenols. Hamden really, I'll just say these 5 things and then switch it back to Karl. Hamden is really about spring water that's from their property, wild spontaneous fermentation, so that's natural yeast that is endemic to the property, right? Pot still distillation, tropical aging, which is really, really important. If I was born in the Bronx and then I moved to Iowa when I was a year old, I couldn't say I was from the Bronx. I would have to say I was from Iowa, because that's where I've grown up. And that's unfortunately what happens to a lot of rum, is it's born in a place like Jamaica, aged in Amsterdam. So it really isn't fully Jamaican. Can still be delicious, but isn't fully Jamaican. This rum is aged fully in Jamaica, and then it's bottled without the addition of any color or any sugar. So it really is as fine a product as you'll find in the rum world, akin to this is made to the same specifications that a really beautiful bourbon would be made to, or a really beautiful single malt Scotch. And I can really go on and on. So I'm going to try to be self-aware here, cut myself off, and give it back to Karl. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. So for those of you who have this rum right now, it's really fantastic rum. And the other key thing to know about rum, so rum, there's a little bit of a debate whether it started in Jamaica or Barbados, right? My lady's Jamaican, so she's here behind the camera right now saying it was obviously Jamaica. But the answer, whether it was Jamaica or Barbados, is one of those things that goes back to, sort of chicken or egg kind of thing, right? But at the end of the day, the idea was you had this molasses. It was annoying. It was cloying. It was everywhere. What do you do with it? And so the idea was, let's give it to the slaves. The slaves had, advanced distillation techniques that they brought from Africa, and they were stressed, right? Obviously, so they started distilling and fermenting and sort of making a crude beer out of this, this molasses that they were given, and then they started distilling it, and it worked very well, and then it started to slowly seep into the colonies, and eventually became so great of a drink that it became a currency. So people traded in rum. So rum was one of the first really great, reliable sort of currencies of the New World. But one of the things that happened was that, it became so valuable that they would, it was on the ships. It was a way that, you would pay folks and sailors. And so the idea was there was a ration of rum, that was given. And it was oftentimes not the greatest rum. So they would mix it with a little bit of what they called lemon, or actually lime, to create, to avoid scurvy, to make it better for you. And then that tasted pretty bad as well. So they started adding sugar and then spices from wherever in the world they were at that time. And with that, you had the beginning of the first sort of great mixed drinks. We called them punches at that time. There's nothing wrong with a great rum punch. But when it came to America, we sort of downsized the punch from being this big drink to a small drink, and cocktails were born. And so the drink that I'm making for you today is sort of an ode to that. It is sour with sweet, and great rum. And we're going to make it in sort of a batch format, because those who bought the kits have the entire bottle. So you have plenty of rum to make plenty of these drinks. So let's get started. So the first thing about this, we're going to start with the thing about making a great drink is about finding balance and striking balance between your sort of more sour and your more sweet. And so if anyone has any thoughts, questions, whatever, please feel free, jump in, unmute yourself, ask questions, because this is interactive. I can talk all day and all night. I mean, it's funny, Valerie's shaking her head right now, unfortunately. But yes, I mean, there's so much to talk about, and we want to keep sort of balance. But the first thing we're going to make today is our sour.
Marissa is asking a question.
So we have a question from Marissa.
She's raising her hand.
Marissa, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thanks, Julia. Thank you for being here, Karl. It's great to see you.
Hey,
I was
Marissa,
wondering. I appreciate you sharing your Friday night with us. I was wondering if you could share the wonderful poem that you did for the other rum punch that we recently looked at with the group, because it's so fabulous, and I think it's just a great way of remembering how to make an easy rum punch.
Oh, absolutely. So so what I'm making today is not a rum punch, but the poem that Marissa is referencing is so great. And if you ever want like a simple mnemonic, and way to remember how to make a great punch with rum, it's 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, 4 of weak, A little spice makes everything nice, you know, served very cold with lots of ice. And so very easy to remember. One of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, 4 of weak. And those are your components in a rum punch. But that basic idea of balancing out sour with sweet is at the key of how you make a great drink. It's about balancing everything. It's about balancing your sour, balancing your sweet, balancing your strong, balancing your weak, making sure that all of those components go so well together. And so we're going to start out today with our sour. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen, you know, you've had an old fashioned and you've garnished it with orange. Orange is a great flavor. It is, you know, when we think citrus, it's probably the most popular of citrus. The flavors are really, really, really delicious, and particularly delicious with rum. But the only challenge we have here is if our goal is to create a sour, then working with orange oftentimes does not give us the ability to do that. Orange is traditionally sweet. So I've got some fresh squeezed orange juice here, and we're going to basically use that orange juice, but we're going to turn it into a sour. So now, one thing you should know, most spirits come in very particular sizes. So this is a 750, which is 750 milliliters. I know the Americans are like milliliters, whatever, doesn't matter. The most important thing to think about is that a 750 milliliter bottle has about 25 ounces. That's the key thing to remember. If it was a liter bottle, it's got 33 ounces. And so those are the two kind of key numbers that you want to remember. So this bottle at 750 milliliters and 25 ounces, if we're doing 2-ounce pours, we're basically talking about making 12 drinks out of this bottle, plus a little shot for the bartender at the end. And so if you're thinking about your mixers, this recipe that we're going to work with today is a very simple kind of formula. It's 2-1-1. 2 ounces of our spirit, 1 ounce of our sour that we're going to make, and 1 ounce of our sweet that we're going to make as well. And so let's start with our sour. And so today, our sour, we're going to be making with our orange. You want to basically take this really sweet, delicious orange juice, and we're going to turn it into a sour. So as I mentioned before, we have essentially 12 drinks to make out of this. And this is our one in this drink. So basically we want to make 12 ounces. So we're going to, in your case, if you have the kit, I've given you exactly the amount of orange juice that you need. You want to pour that into a bowl or some sort of container. The amount's already there. You just want to pour it in there right now. But I'm going to measure this out. I'm going to measure out 12 ounces. So this is a jigger. Jiggers are all about precision. That's the reason that you want a jigger. It's not that your bartender's cheap or anything like that. He just wants your drink to be the same every single time. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8. All right. 10, 12. All right, so we now have in our container here just enough of our will be our sour, so that when we combine it, we'll have our perfect ratios. Now in your package as well, you have a small little baggie. In that baggie is citric acid. Citric acid is basically, it's a natural fruit acid. It comes from lemon, lime, either one. You can buy it in the store as sour salt. But what it's going to do is it will bring the acidity and the sour taste that we want to this orange juice. So I could have, instead of using orange in here, maybe add a little bit of orange and use lemon or lime juice. But what the citric acid gives me the ability to do is get that full, rich orange flavor and make that sour, and then also allow it to have longevity to it as well. It's also preservative. So if you make this and you mix this with your orange, you're actually going to be able to use this and drink this, use this as your sour base for a much longer period if you just juice an orange or, a lemon or a lime. So we'll go ahead and open this. And again, feel free to jump in if you have any questions. I hope you're at home, you're pouring your, you got your citric acid with you. And this is one of those things that became pretty popular as sort of the molecular gastronomy craze took over years ago. It was about like taking all of these really natural things and making great food and drinks out of it. But you're able to take flavors and processes and really really shrink them down and into these sort of these little methods of doing things. So I'm going to take citric acid. Now, again, I've made this really easy for you. If you have the kit, you can take all of the citric you have in there and pour it right in. However, the idea here is that you want to get this to the point where it has the right amount of sour for you. So there's about an ounce of citric acid there. That ounce, those 12 ounces of orange, is exactly the right amount to produce like the perfect balance for my palate. If you want to play with this, you can sort of just add your citric as you go along, right? But I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in, and I'm going to throw a full ounce of citric into my OJ here. So go ahead, throw it in there. And then just give that a really nice stir. And you'll see this dissolves really easily. You can see that dissolves super easy. It's not hard to dissolve the citric acid. It basically melts right into your OJ. The way that you would do this is if you were uncertain of the right amount of sour for you, is you add a little bit, you taste, you add a little bit, you taste. I don't know if you have friends and family over, and that's perfect. So I got this orange juice that has now become a sour, and it's perfect for my drink. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put this aside for a second here, so that when I'm ready to make drinks, I now have my sour. Now, this drink is called the Yale Beats Harvard, and of course that's a funny play on words because we are using beet. And so, ironically, beets were a key part of what sort of ended the dominance of and ended the slave trade, because they figured out how to make sugar from beets in France, and that basically weakened the market for sugarcane in the Caribbean. So it's a good thing, right? Because it was one of the factors that sort of began to break down slavery. But beets have a lot of sugar in them already, so they make for a really, really rich sort of and great syrup. Now, in cocktail making, we talk about our types of syrup. We have what's called a rich simple syrup. We have a regular simple syrup, or more classical that we use for cocktails, and then there's lighter simple syrups. So the basic formula for a simple syrup is equal proportions of your liquid to your sugar, and that's how you make it, right? So in this case, because there's already a lot of sugar in the beets that we have, being able to make our syrup is we're going to do this over heat to make sure that we actually get the right amount of getting this dissolved and everything in there. I'm going to start this up right now, and so I have a little bit of right here. I've got a pot going here on the stove, and we're working on getting our 12 ounces. And so we'll start with this here, and we'll add 12 ounces to our pot. That's 2. Three.
I want to say one thing about balance. A lot of people who aren't bartenders, who aren't familiar with balancing sweet and sour, everyone here has made salad dressing, right? And you're always trying to balance your fat and your acid in a salad dressing. And this is basically the same thing, except you're subbing sweet and sour for your fat and acid, right? You've all made an oil and vinegar dressing. This is really no different. It's not more complicated. And it really is kind of as easy and intuitive. And I'm going to mute myself again.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And like a lot of the techniques that people define as being sort of craft cocktail or mixology techniques began in the kitchen. And so being able to understand that these techniques came from the kitchen, and they are really about sort of optimization of, like our name is optimization, but sort of kind of moving those techniques from being about the kitchen to being about the bar is really what we're doing right now. All right, so in your kit as well, there's sugar. And so again, I've made this really easy for you. You have the amount of sugar you have there is equal to the amount of beet juice you have already. So you can go ahead and throw it right in there. But again, there's 12 ounces of beet juice in there. I'm going to add about again. So one thing to think about is this is 12 ounces by volume. There's different ways to think about sort of volume and the like. But I'm going to go ahead and throw the sugar in here. And again, because there's sugar already in the beets, that's why I'm doing this over heat. Doing this over heat allows me to be able to add more to this. You can make a simple syrup again easily if you wanted to make a basic simple. If you have water, that's another way to make it. So if you wanted to go back to our formula where we're talking about 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, and you wanted your sweet to be a simple syrup, then you would take your 1-to-1, your sugar, equal proportions of sugar and water, and now you've got a simple, and that becomes your sweet. So in this case, I've got this going, and it's not about really doing anything other than getting this dissolved, the sugar dissolved in there. And so that's all I'm doing right now. I'm just making sure that I have, once it's dissolved, I don't want it to heat it so much that it's boiling or anything like that. Like I don't have to do anything to that degree. I'm just trying to get it to the point where it is like mixed up enough where it's fully dissolved inside there. So you can kind of see it's coming together here. Look at that. Like all of that sugar that I just poured in there has pretty much disappeared, and that's just with a little bit of heat. This is going to be served cold. So again, the idea is I don't want to spend too much time trying to too much time on that heat. It's just enough to make sure that I can dissolve all of my sugar in there.
Okay. We're not unfortunately.
Is there a question there? All think maybe somebody was jumping ahead. They were drinking already. All right. So there we go. Look at that. All of that sugar is completely dissolved.
Okay, now can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so you had 12 ounces of beet juice, is that right?
It's 12 ounces of beet juice, yes.
Okay, and then you added how many ounces of sugar?
The equal proportions of sugar.
Okay,
So 12 ounces of sugar to that as well.
okay, great. And if we already, so simple syrup, if we already had simple syrup made, don't use that. Just use 12 ounces of sugar.
No, because what you're doing is you're already adding your water to this. So water is a key part of making a cocktail, and that's what the ice that you're going to add to this in a second when you shake already brings that water in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem. All right. So now you are, I mean, at this point, you now have your sour, your sweet, and your strong. There's no weak here because we're not making a rum punch. We're making a cocktail. And so looks like we are ready to make some drinks. So we're gonna start out with our sour. And is everybody with me? Everyone's ready to go? All right, so let's take 1 ounce. And the cool thing about this, right? Like oftentimes when I'm making this, what I just did right now is enough so we can break it down and make it drink by drink. But if you have a group of people right now who are sitting in your house ready to go with this cocktail, then let's go. You can literally take your simple, your sour, throw it all in like a big bowl, add the rum, and you're done. You know, taste it. I mean, I would add it slowly to make sure you got the balance feels right, but you are literally ready to go. But in our case, you know, we're gonna make this drink by drink. And so let's get started. So let's take this, we'll do 1 ounce. Well, I think I would get in trouble if I only made 1 drink. So I'm gonna make 2. So I'm gonna do 2 ounces. So, okay, that's 1 of our delicious orange sour here.
Never leave the cameraman dry. Never.
Not at all. That would be a terrible move. And I'm lucky. My beautiful lady is also a frontline worker, working in the hospital, and then she comes home and we have a 2-year-old. So let's just say that this drink is something that I'm sure she will enjoy a lot. We're adding our 2 ounces of our syrup here. All right. And then the good stuff. And so we're going to do a full 2 ounce pour. There are some places that'll do 1.5 ounces pour on a drink. But I'm like, let's go all the way in. Let's have a good time. It's a Friday night. So let's just go for that. And then we'll add some ice. We'll throw our ice into our shaker here. And I'm gonna do what's called a hard shake. A hard shake is really just about creating, it's about creating the right amount of dilution, the right amount of cooling. You can already see there's some, little bit of cooling happening here already. But that's what a hard shake is about. It's about getting that. So you'll see when I'm done shaking this entire area will be frosted. And that's how I know my drink is ready. If you don't have shakers at home, you can sort of throw, which is going sort of back and forth between 2 measuring cups, whatever. The idea is about about diluting and cooling. So.
One of the really important things is that you're getting the movement back and forth with the ends in the lengthwise, right? You're not going to shake like this, like Homer Simpson shaking Bart Simpson's neck, but like back and forth, right? Like I see you with your shaker here. You want to hold it horizontally and move laterally. Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's really the way you want to shake. And you can't shake a drink too hard. It's impossible. Seriously, I'm 6'3", 240 pounds. I've never shaken a drink too hard.
But shaking is so important. And if you go into a bar and your bartender is doing one of these lazy shakes, like, and then pours your drink, I suggest you throw your drink back at him, because he is taking you for granted. Like, you want a good drink, you want your drink to be. I don't suggest that. Don't throw your drink at your bartender. But know that is one way of knowing that you have walked into a good bar, is when the bartender is paying attention to even that seemingly minute of a detail. So this drink, because it's so rich, is best served over ice on the rocks. If we were at 67 Orange or the Anchor right now, we'd be putting a big fat cube in these glasses, but we're not right now, so we're going to use this. The strainer is really about taking that ice that's already began its dilution. Remember I talked about the frost that you would start to see? So I can write my name. I can say, K loves V. You can do stuff like that, right? So it's one of these things where this thing right here is a Hawthorne shaker, Hawthorne strainer here. And so let's just go ahead and pour this out right here. There we go. All right, the last and certainly not least in your kits is a garnish. Now, one of the problems that you often see in bars that are not great bars, but is that the idea of a garnish is something that you just do. It doesn't have real meaning or value or anything like that. That should never be the case. A garnish is a component to the cocktail. It gives flavor to the cocktail. It adds to what's there. And in this case, I'm using a dehydrated orange wheel. I want to give sort of that flavor, that smell, that orange. I want to highlight that's in the cocktail. But I'm not looking to, if I was using a fresh orange peel, it was because I wanted some of the orange oil to be within the cocktail. And I will say one of the things that I didn't tell you about is a little bit of secret sauce, right? So in any great bar, there's going to be little things that you may not be told about that are part of the recipe. One of them is this. This is Molasses Bitters. And so what I have clandestinely done, secretly done, is added some bitters to your beet juice. So you already have this added to your beet juice, this Molasses Bitters. I just really wanted to bring out some of those cane notes. So that's a little bit of secret sauce to this cocktail that elevates it to a next level. And again, you already have this added to yours. I'm gonna dash a little bit in mine right here, but it's already in your beet juice already. All right, so we have reached the moment of truth, that exciting moment at the end of this great time where we actually get to drink. So I have a whole pot here and a whole vase here full of sour and sweet. So I plan to be drinking for for a while. But I would love to hear your thoughts as you drink your cocktails, and let me know what you think. This is the Yale Beats Harvard. Yale Beats Harvard every day, one by one, in whatever we do. But I would love to hear your thoughts. Let's try it out and tell me what you think. Here you go, baby.
And it's particularly poignant that we're drinking this cocktail today because normally tomorrow would be the Yale-Harvard game. So I'm going to say that we won.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know if anyone was at the game last year. It was crazy, but it was a great game to see, that overtime win. So, thoughts on the cocktail?
It's just like, Karl, you're the best.
Yeah, everyone, please feel free to unmute yourself and add your comments.
I made an error in adding the citric acid. I thought, well, I don't want it as sour as you might like it, but now my finished drink isn't sour enough. So I think I'm with you on the making sure the sour is just right. And I do taste the molasses. I grew up in a sugar town, so.
Oh, nice.
My dad was a beet sugar chemist, though.
Okay.
And my grandfather was a bootlegger, so we know our alcohol, but very tasty.
Well,
Thank you.
You sound like someone I would love to hang out with then. Well, I will say this though, the great thing about this, you can always add more citric to your to your juice and brighten it up a little bit. It's easy for people to imagine that it's going to be too sour. I'm worried about being sour. I want to be sweet enough. It's actually harder to get your sour right than it is to get your sweet right. Sweetness is easy. It's always there. It's the first thing we taste. Sour and balancing sour is the tricky part.
And Patricia in the comments did share that apparently last year's game, which you mentioned, is going to be streaming tomorrow on ESPN3 at noon. So good opportunity to make this cocktail again tomorrow at noon and drink it while watching.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll win again. Jan, any last thoughts or words we need to tell folks? See if we can get them out to Jamaica, huh?
Was that a question for me?
I think Jan has been drinking some of his rum.
No, I actually was saying something at the same time, so I didn't hear your whole question. No, I think people know what they need to know. Everybody's, I think, pretty happy. The only thing I would say is that you could just sprinkle a little bit of citric acid in your cocktail now and stir it to balance it if it's not balanced. To I think was it Miriam Schneider? You could just add a little bit of citric, like you would add salt to a soup or something, and stir and be fine. But yeah, if you do get to come to Jamaica, you should definitely visit the Hamden Estate Distillery. It's about an hour and a half drive from Montego Bay. You can stay at Round Hill. That's the view behind me from my hotel room at Round Hill. Do it, go. It really is spectacular. There's a question in here. It says, where does one buy citric acid?
So if you're in New York City, there's a great grocer that has a lot of these kind of things, beet juice, things like that. It's called Kalustuyans, Kalstuyans. So that's a great place to get something like citric acid. But a lot of Whole Foods will have it. Sort of your more wholesome grocers will carry these kind of things.
I hear our boy Jeff Bezos sells it also.
Yeah, amongst a million other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot more comments coming through, just different advice for how to get that citric acid. That was a really interesting idea. I've never thought of using that in a cocktail before. I think I use it to clean things instead.
Yeah, I mean, so the nice thing about citric acid is it allows you, I love, orange flavor, particularly in this cocktail. I would never be able to get the right amount of orange flavor into this cocktail without creating the orange acid. So the orange plus citric acid, because to get to the right amount of flavor with balancing out the sweet, I would need to add lime or something like that. And now we have competing citrus flavors, and it just wouldn't be there. And so what this does is that flavor is so rich. I'm getting all of the orange, all of the beet, and then this rum. So one of the things that sort of separates, rum. So if you think about sort of classifications of rum, I talked before about the idea that, Jamaica and Barbados kind of have this debate about where rum started. That's considered English style rum, and it's basically natural yeast, a lot of sort of natural fermentation, done in a pot still. So you're really getting a flavor for the distillate. You're not distilling to a proof where you have eliminated all of that sort of natural kind of flavor from that rum. And that's sort of what separates it from the Spanish style. Spanish style rums are extremely clean. You think of them as sort of your Cuban and your Puerto Rican and Dominican rums, and they are distilled almost to the point of being a vodka. And a lot of the flavor of the cane gets lost in those rums. And then there's what we call agricole rums, or French style rums, where we're not even turning the sugarcane, we're not even like pulling the molasses out. We're literally taking the sugarcane juice and adding yeast and fermenting the actual juice, and then using that to produce rum. So you're getting all of the flavors of the cane. You're getting all of that grass, that sort of herbaceous quality that's there. So it's, and then there's all these new world rums and old world rums and rums from around the world that sort of, play in all these different categories. But if you think about it, that's how you kind of get at what rum is. But what sort of sets Jamaican rums out is that funk, that like realness, that molasses. And so all I'm doing with the bitters is just playing with that, but again, adding no more sweetness to this thing. Recognizing that beet is going to be even a little bit sweeter because it is beet. Recognizing that my sour is going to have some sweetness because it's orange, and then balancing it out with a little bit of bitter.
Yeah, one thing I want to say is that rum itself is not inherently sweet. It is made from sugar, but literally every alcoholic beverage on the planet is made from sugar. Yeast has to eat sugar to produce alcohol. So it's you're using the sugar in sugarcane, or the sugar in a grain, or the sugar in grapes. And then you're distilling, and once you distill, there is no sugar left over in the distillate. It's actually chemically impossible. I mean, I didn't take any chemistry classes ever, but that's what I've been told. So rum really is not sweet. Unfortunately, there are rum producers who will add sugar after distillation and aging to make a smooth product. And that really is kind of a sad thing as far as I'm concerned. There's a question about another rum cocktail in here. I think the particular rum you have now, which is a nice aged rum, you can make an old fashioned with this rum, or a Manhattan style cocktail with this rum, and be really, really happy. And then there's a mention of Wayne Curtis's book. Wayne Curtis's book is great. And a bottle of rum. It's actually kind of a history and drink book. So there's 10 different cocktails, I think, that he kind of picks out by era and then talks about that era of rum production. One of the other things Karl hit on very briefly was kind of the different styles of rum. And that's one of the things, there it is. Yeah, that's the book, which is a really fantastic book. The different styles of rum, and even in, an ex-English colony, you might be getting very different styles of rum. Guyana has its own style. Jamaica has its own style. Barbados is a little bit different. Fiji is certainly really wild and strange. And those are all ex-British colonies that basically get their original distillation technology from the same places, and then kind of grow and change a little bit. And, the thing that makes Jamaican rum so funky. And if you smell this rum by itself, it'll have kind of a fermented fruit, like a baked banana kind of smell. That comes from esters and phenols in the final product. And those esters, which are the primary carriers of aroma and flavor in the distilled spirit, those are formed during the fermentation process, right? So you're adding some acid to the fermentation. The same way you added acid to that orange juice, the Jamaicans are using something called dunder, which is the leftover in the still, which is just a black liquid rich in dead yeast cells and carboxylic acids. They're adding that to the fermentation, and then that provides an ester-rich cane beer, sort of, right? So it'll be lower alcohol, higher in esters, and then they run that through a pot still, a double retort, which is, you can get one run to about 70% or 60% alcohol, as opposed to continuous column still distillation, like he mentioned about Spanish islands or ex-Spanish colonies, where that's going to like 94% alcohol. So if you're only distilling to 60 or 70%, you're leaving in a lot of those flavors. And then use the word clean, and I like to use clean and dirty a lot. This rum that you have is dirty, right? It is, but dirty is not bad. Dirty is what makes life good. It is. And specifically in this, if your end product of distillation is just pure alcohol, anything else is imperfection, is contamination, sort of. So the flavor that you're getting here is really not the aim of distillation, sort of. It is certainly the aim of these producers, but not the aim of distillation, right? So it is dirt, it is contamination, but yeah, and that's Sam is right on with what he just wrote, that there's also the heads and tails of the distillation. So you have different chemicals coming out at different times in your distillation. If your distillation is in a pot still, if it's in a column still, it's different, because then the different so pot still distillation is a function of time, and column still distillation is a function of space, right?
A number of plates.
Right, you have right, and each plate separates a temperature zone in the column, and you're pulling different chemicals and different aromatic properties from each temperature zone, sort of. Whereas in a pot still, it's time. So a pot still really gives you heads and tails, or a batch distillation, which can be done in a column. It gives you heads and tails, and there are esters usually concentrated in the tails, I believe.
Yeah, and I saw Miriam just, she talked about being in Haiti. I mean, so in Haiti, they have Clarin. Clarin is basically a really traditional, basically agricole rum. And so, but the idea of heads and tails becomes really critical. So you're literally taking that juice, fresh pressing it, and then fermenting it with local yeast and distilling it right there. In sort of these like backyard stills, and but the flavor is so robust. Like it's not for everybody. I find that not everyone loves that funky taste of a Jamaican, of a pure agricole in a pot still, because there are agricoles done in column, and our agricole style done in column. But it really comes down to the richness of the flavor you get, and it's not everyone wants that kind of taste. This drink is really that. I mean, beet, orange. It's highlighting the orange by adding citric. So it's really strong orange, really strong beet, really strong, funky Jamaican rum. This cocktail is just a lot. It's not something that everyone's gonna love, but it's rich, it's full of flavor, and for me, that's what I was looking for in this drink.
It's funny that you mentioned a Haitian divorce, Miriam. There's actually a cocktail called a Haitian divorce. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a Tom Richter. Do you know Tom Richter, who worked at Dear Irving and the Beagle?
Yep.
Pretty nice dude. It's Angostura bitters, Pedro Jimenez sherry, a little bit of mezcal, and then a bunch of Barbancourt. Sort of an old-fashioned style cocktail, or a Manhattan style cocktail. but it's just a cool cocktail, Haitian Divorce. When you wrote that, I was like, man, that is so cool. I didn't know Haitian divorces were a thing. I thought it was just a cocktail. I didn't know it was a. What is a Haitian divorce decree? Can you unmute yourself and tell me? So I'm curious.
Well, this dates back to an era when you couldn't get a no-fault divorce, and Haiti granted divorce decrees with very little residency requirement, less than 2 weeks. So Haiti was actually probably the divorce capital of New York State for
Wow.
a period of time in the 60s and 70s. And he went to Haiti to get a divorce and spent 2 weeks at a hotel there drinking rum and cokes, and came home
Wow.
with a decree in French. And so, yeah. When we had to apply for our marriage license, it's like the decree is in French, but thankfully we had an English translation.
That's amazing. It's a long way to go to get a divorce.
Well, I will say this, one of the great things about cocktails and drink making is that you could trace the entire history of the modern world through drinks. There was a drink at some point at either there was a drink or there was the fact that drinks weren't allowed to be there that defines almost every period or every major event that happened throughout sort of modern, times. And so, like one of the things that really attracted me to this world was the history. 67 Orange. 67 Orange is the last known address of Almack's Dance Hall. Almack's Dance Hall was located at 67 Orange Street in the 1840s, and it was the place where tap dance was created. It's got this amazing history, and so that was sort of what drew me to that as I sort of looked at opening a bar in Harlem. The Anchor opened since 1939. Opened during kind of immediately following Prohibition, and really swanky cocktail bar, in its heyday, and of course now. So history is a key part of sort of modern drinking, and you'll find if you read cocktail books, if you sort of get into what a lot of us within this cocktail world are sort of geeking off of, it's the history of what it is we're doing. It's the story behind what's inside the shaker. And it kind of gave us a way to be, really well read and educated and thought out lushes.
Karl, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you get your motivation for your different cocktails, because they're all so unique and so complex, but very different.
Honestly, the inspiration comes from multiple places. My life, my experiences. A lot of it starts from kind of structures or ideas. So I've read, my first hobby as a kid was reading, and so I've read a lot of cocktail books, and so I often start thinking about things from this structure of, is it a daiquiri, is it a Manhattan, is it sort of like, what about those basic formulas and old fashioned that kind of could define something, and then letting my mind run wild on things that I'm experiencing and tasting. So I recently tried a tequila reposado, which means it's been aged. So anywhere from 12 months to under 2 years. And I got all these really herbaceous notes from this tequila I was tasting, and just started putting it together. So, chartreuse, one of the most herbaceous liqueurs I could think of. Adding some fruit, adding green apple, maybe because of the time, some sage, infusing the sage and the green apple in oil. Actually, wait, do I have it? I have it here. Yeah. So this was the sort of the thing there. This is sage and green apple in olive oil and extra virgin olive oil, and just a little few drops on the top of that cocktail give it these, add to all of the notes of what that cocktail is. I mean, it's like that. It's kind of a mad science. It's at the end of the day, it's got structure, but it's not just about the structure. It's about the flavor. It's about the idea and the direction and where I want to go with it.
It's amazing. And I hope everyone enjoy their cocktails at home, but also be sure to check out one of these two bars, which serve even more amazing cocktails. And I believe, Karl, you have cocktail kits for a lot of different cocktails on your website.
Yeah. So, part of living in this pandemic era world is pivoting and figuring out how to ultimately. So at the end of the day, like, what does a good bar have? At the beginning of the pandemic, probably most of us thought it was good drinks and good food that we could literally take, a Zoom class and we'd be perfect every time, and good to go. And then we started to realize that even with the best instruction and with the best of, everything that you just had, that we were still missing the experience. We were still missing the lighting, the music, the comfortable seating, the thought about interior design, the combination of sort of touching every bit of your senses. And that is ultimately what I love the most about this, is being able to do that, to be able to create experiences that do all of that. And so can't recreate all of that, but what I can do what we're doing is to do the most that we can. So we do have kits for a lot of our cocktails. We've mixed in all the little nuances. So I told you about the bitters, don't tell anybody. At the end of the day, that's our secret. But it is in our kits, those little details are in there, and you can grab any of the kits on either 67 Orange or Anchor, Spa, our sites. But this is a tough time. There's a lot of small businesses that are struggling. There's a lot of there's been studies that show that bars, restaurants, gyms, those are the areas where the spread is the highest. It's hard for me to say this, but it's probably better if we weren't open. But we all have to eat. We have to feed our families. We hire and employ more than any other industry. And so hopefully something will work out for our industry soon, so that we can get some stimulus, we can get some way to focus on making sure that we can stay in business and keep everyone going and wait this whole crazy time out, get a vaccine out there, and get everyone better so we can go back to giving you that entire thing. Because until we can, it'll always be just, a little bit shy of what it could be.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this class for us today. Everyone, support your local businesses. Do what you can to help them out in this time. But in the meantime, drink lots of cocktails.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Hope to see you at another event soon.